Hello, and we are live again for another live chat about the mysteries of Japanese tea. This chat we are going to be talking about, of course, because it's the season, it's spring, things are coming to life again. Also, the tea gardens are showing more fresh green sprouts, and those are soon going to be harvested. So, we're nearing the harvesting season, which is also always an exciting time because we're going to be able to drink the delicious Shincha, the fresh first flush, in about a month and a half. So we'll be looking forward to that.
Very exciting time for tea in Japan.
Very exciting time. That being said, we're drinking a tea from 2018, very old tea, not new tea, but we're still enjoying some of the lingering sentiments of winter, where some aged teas sometimes go better with the weather. Although it's getting pretty hot.
Yeah, it really has been very warm the last couple days.
It's been above 20 degrees Celsius. The weather is also pretty nice. We had a good downpour yesterday.
We certainly did.
Unexpected a little, but it cools things up a little bit.
Yeah.
Makes it nice.
Yeah, it was pretty nice this morning. A little bit cloudy.
So...
All right, let's get into Shincha.
Yeah, we do have a few viewers joining on, so great. Of course, everyone, always remember, you can send us comments, questions, and it'd just be nice to
have
a little conversation.
Yes.
So, Shincha, I think it's a good idea to talk a bit about Shincha and
what is it and
what is it?
What happens around this time?
Yeah. Well, let's pinpoint that a little. I'll give you the direction to guide the topic a little bit.
Okay. First, well, let's see. I think it's pretty clear what happens on the actual tea farms. People they're getting ready for harvest. Is there any sort of hype or excitement or anything for just consumers outside the tea industry, or is it really just a tea farm event?
Right. That's a bit of a loaded question, but
really?
Oh, wait. Is any question you ask me about tea not loaded then?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. There's so much at play always, and there's a lot of things that need to get nuanced. So first of all, what does it mean for farmers on their tea gardens? It's always it's a quiet time. There's not much going on. They might be weeding a little bit. They might be trimming the tea bushes. That's usually around February, so to get the tea trees ready for their production of new buds. And especially if you're working with handheld machines, what you do is really you cut the surface. And so basically before harvest, in order to let the new sprouts grow, the fresh buds of tea leaves, to let them grow, what you do is you cut off and trim the surface of those rows of tea trees to then above that surface, let those new sprouts shoot. And you're going to harvest it, again at the same height.
Right. Several times throughout the year.
Well, not the producers that I work with, but...
Yeah, depending. The one that I did work with.
Yeah. Most of the farmers that I work with only harvest in spring. And so there's no later harvests. Sometimes they do a pruning.
And that's towards the end of the season, right?
That's usually throughout the end, or they might do it again in intermediary in summer. And other farmers, if they see that their bushes are very vigorous and could do with another harvest, then they harvest it for For example, black tea in summer. When you
Okay.
have more catechins, the leaf is coarser,
Mhm.
etc. That makes for bitter black tea.
Mhm.
So some of them do that. But most of them just stick with the first harvest, the spring harvest. And so because most of them are so dependent on their spring harvest, this time, especially April, we're in the
It's a
middle of
very,
April,
very important time, isn't it?
this is where everyone holds their breath. Because
The
as everyone
weather.
knows, April, we were just talking, it's we had a downpour, it's a bit cooler today, the days were pretty warm. From the time the temperatures start going up, the tea bush comes out of hibernation, and it says, now let's produce some very delicious new tiny buds that are very
Very
fragile
fresh,
and
very
tender, so delicious but so fragile.
yeah. It's a very delicate time.
And
of
now
the
we get
year.
into April, and as everyone knows, April, warm,
Cold, warm,
but
cold.
then suddenly you have a night of frost. And that night of frost is really what everyone is so afraid of, because if that happens,
Really hurts the harvest.
your tiny buds
All die.
all die. They freeze, and that means that they start to oxidize. Some producers still use those frost-bitten buds for black tea. Which again makes something completely different and interesting. It's not a major product, so
right.
and it's only when they think,
happens.
well, now we've lost so many. I mean, 2 years ago, 30% of the harvest was damaged. Last year, about a similar amount of it, especially in Wazuka, it was.
Oh yeah.
Everyone was dead.
Yeah, I remember I started working, volunteering at the Obubu in Wazuka,
Right.
and they were talking about that they had a frost. And I saw actually in their store, on their online shop, I believe it was not from last year, but it was from a year before. They have that frost. They call it Frost Nightmare. Is the name of the teas, because it was a.
So it's basically the frostbitten tea. It's got a little bit of oxidation going.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a obviously very small batch. They didn't sell a lot of it. It was just kind of a specialty thing. Like, if you want to try frostbitten tea.
Basically because they had to.
Yeah.
Because 60% of their harvest was damaged.
Yeah.
And you don't want to let that go to waste entirely. And you'd better do something with it because you have so much of it. So last year it was so hard even that the tea gardens that have those wind fans, I'm sure that everyone has seen photos and has wondered, what do those big poles with fans on at the tea gardens, what are they for? Well, they are basically there to blow the wind and keep the circulation going so that frost can't land on the tea. And so to make sure that you don't get frostbite even if there's a night of frost. Now, last year, even the farms with those mills, with those fans, were affected. The fans were not strong enough to keep the frost away. It was so intense.
Wow.
So frost is really something that most farmers are weary about, and especially now are so careful about.
It's just such a volatile weather in these months. Very delicate time for the tea.
And let's touch on wood. We're mid-April.
Seems like
things
are
should
going all right.
be fine. Things seem to be going well.
Yeah, it has been very warm recently.
I think
suddenly it got
for a change, we might actually have a normal harvest. And that'd be amazing.
That would be nice. Yeah.
That would be nice. So with that harvest, then we're of course going to be able to enjoy some very delicious Shincha, fresh tea again. And Shincha, it actually comes from, especially in Japan, the idea that everything that has just come in season, things that are again available for the first time in the year, which is the lunar calendar, um, they call shun. And now is the best time to eat it because it's freshest, is the idea.
Mm.
And T2 is considered to be most delicious after the tea tree comes out of hibernation, because during winter, in order to not freeze, the tea trees gather starch in their roots. Starch is basically sugar, so
Build it all
sweetness.
up.
They gather that gradually throughout the months in winter, so to not freeze their roots. And then in spring, that starch becomes nourishment for the fresh new buds. So it's those fresh new buds that we want to obtain
'Cause they
in
have
order
the
to have the most delicious,
delicious
sweetest,
sweet tea.
yeah,
Mhm.
tea. Now, of course, if those get affected by frost, that
That's-
starch has already been used. Those
all
buds are
lost.
dead, and if you have to restart and wait again for the new buds to grow after you had to suffer a frostbite, then well, it's less nutritious. You have less nourishment available for those new buds to grow. So
So they aren't as sweet. They don't have as much.
yes,
Of the
and
same
that's
flavors.
exactly what happened with last year's and the year before's tea.
They just
Is
lost
that
all of the.
they were not as as intense in flavor as you would have wanted it.
Well, fingers crossed for this year. Hopefully
Yeah.
everything goes well.
Well, I say it will,
Yes, that's
and this year's tea is going to be amazing.
right. First season in a couple years, hopefully.
I'm pretty sure about that, because as we say, everything is energy, right? Everything is energy, and the energy on the planet for the past 2 years has been pretty bad.
Yeah.
Especially with the global pandemic situation, with the way everyone has reacted to it, and with the no, I should say the reaction in general to it. It's not an individual thing. The reaction in general to it has been rather negative, resulting in a negative circulation of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure that nature has
Taking some hit.
it also experienced that, meaning that the tea also sort of
Feels the effects of
feels the
pandemic.
effects and produces itself in line with the energy that is current on the planet. And gradually you can feel that the energies are rising. The energy is coming back. It's becoming stronger. And I'm convinced that the tea this year is also going to be much more vibrant, vigorous, full of life. And what I hear from some of the producers that I work with, that are mostly organic, natural growers, and some of the ideas that they get about food and nutrition, they also get from macrobiotic studies, etc. So what they say is the importance of drinking Shincha right when the leaf is ready, harvested, processed within a few days of having obtained that leaf. The importance of doing that is because the tea produces what we as humans need in our body to be healthy for that year. So every year the tea being different
Okay.
is because
So each
it
year.
brings us what we need as a species to survive during that year. So if you think about tea growing itself in line with the energies, in line with now sensing that things are becoming more lively again, we need more vigor and energy and freshness and light and brightness and shining and everything. The tea is going to produce that and bring that to us.
I look forward to it.
So that's
certainly hope so.
that's my prediction for the Shincha for this year.
Well, it is certainly easy to be optimistic in weather like what we've been having recently.
It's becoming easier. It wasn't easy the past 2 years to be optimistic, be honest.
No.
Hmm. Well, having said that, also touched a bit on why it's important to drink Shincha.
Mhm.
But,
Other than
but,
but.
there is one big misunderstanding that needs to be cleared.
Okay.
It's about one specific type of tea. Which type of tea do you think it is?
Type as in green, black, or oolong tea? Or
Type as in, well, a bit more specific. And it's in regard to Shincha, of course.
Oh, I don't know a lot of specifics about Shincha, one specific type of tea.
Mhm.
There's a lot of misconceptions about it.
Yes, about the Shincha form of it.
The Shincha form of it.
Yes.
I can't think, nothing's coming up.
Well, probably if I say it, you'd be, right.
It's definitely seeming like that kind of thing. Like something that sounds familiar and like it, yeah. I think as soon as I hear it, I'm gonna.
So it's matcha.
Hmm.
Matcha.
Hmm.
When is the Shincha for matcha available?
It's. I'm guessing not immediately after the Shincha season, like
No.
most others.
Exactly.
Is it not until the next year?
According to some, until next year, but half a year would do. Matcha traditionally is harvested in spring, processed as tencha, which is the base material leaf form of matcha, just a stage before it is put into a stone mill, milled, and then produced into this powder that we all know as matcha. So matcha does not become matcha, it stays tencha until it's needed. And in spring, what happens, when the producer makes the tea, it is then stored
as
tencha for half a year at least. And then finally in November, it's brought out to be milled and presented as
fresh matcha.
Fresh matcha. Matcha, in most cases, must be matured.
In the tencha stage?
Matcha is always preserved in tencha state. It's never preserved in matcha state.
Yeah, right.
So it's in Japan, matcha is always kept in a storage in leaf form. And even when I need some matcha from a producer, I would put in an order. They would get out the tencha,
and then
mill it
to your order.
Yes.
And there's no matcha that like they don't store it, they just make the tencha and then they immediately make the matcha? Is there any like that, or is it necessarily stored?
It must be stored.
Oh.
Although in the past 5, 6, 7 years there has been some misconception, mostly due to tourism in Kyoto.
Okay.
Everything due to tourism in Kyoto, of course. But some firms have started making Shincha matcha and have been bringing the matcha out immediately after it was harvested in spring.
And that's actually what was harvested in spring. It's not something that's been stored and they just take it out.
It's actually just harvested now, brought out, milled immediately.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Of course, they are of the opinion, if it makes money, fine, we don't care about the rest. But it's harmful for you. Do not drink it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just about to ask what the difference is.
So ever since the Edo period, there's this food scholar in Japan. His name's Kaibara Ekken. He's a doctor, but he also published a lot about food and nutrition and how we should, care about our food, care about what we eat and when we eat it. And the idea that we should eat things as fresh as possible, he says, with tea is wrong, because tea can be so powerful that it can damage your stomach. It is too intense, especially if you have too many catechins and too many caffeine in it. It can actually affect your stomach in a bad way.
And if you drink it as matcha, then it's stronger.
It is much stronger, yes, because it's a food form which you also have to digest. So he says,
it's too strong.
Do not drink it as Shincha at all. It will not cure your illness. It will actually create more illness. Leave it out for a year. And he says a year. Leave it to rest and drink it the year after.
And that's even if you buy it as powdered matcha.
No, you should actually, at the producer's facility, have it.
So he's talking to the producers, not to consumers.
Well, in the past, everyone had it as tencha. You bought matcha as tencha.
Really?
So
then you milled it yourself?
And then you mill it yourself. Everyone, well, not everyone, but the people that drank tea had a small stone mill that they would use at their own house. And that's really what happens in November when there's the opening of the tea jar ceremony, and the fresh tea leaf is brought out of the tea jar, then milled. Yeah, and then used in that ceremony and offered for the very first time. So he said at least a year, but half a year is okay. And that maturation process does settle down a lot of those very young, vigorous components that could actually affect you for the worse. So that's one idea. And that idea is being very common until recent years, where there was the misconception. And the misconception about that really comes from the boom of matcha in the West, everyone knowing matcha is healthy and good for you, and having encountered Shincha in spring in sencha form in Japan.
And just decided that applied to matcha tea.
Yeah, you get the explanation that, well, you need to have it freshest because that's the most delicious. And then they thought tea is tea, right? So we should get Shincha matcha. Why can't we get Shincha matcha? And so because the tourists were asking for that, tea farms
started doing it.
Started producing that.
Regardless of health
not caring about their cultural heritage. Because not only Kaibara Eiken says that it's bad for you, and people might say, I have a strong stomach, I can deal with it. No one would actually drink tea until at least half a year after it's matured, and that was mostly because
of that.
Tea blenders would be sent out from Tokyo to Kyoto to oversee the harvest, get the best tea leaf together, put it in a big jar, and carry it back to the shogunate in Tokyo. And that procession
wouldn't arrive until?
Lasted for half a year. They would be on the road for 3 months. But during summer, it'd be too hot to travel. So they would rest along the way, and they would put the jar somewhere safe in a storeroom to keep it cool, because it's otherwise too hot in summer. And that procession takes half a year to reach Tokyo.
Imagine.
And when it arrives,
that's when the ceremony
That's when the jar is opened and the ceremony happens. So that's the cultural heritage, the cultural idea behind doing this ceremony in November. At a regular household, the fresh tea would be stored in a jar, sealed off, and where there's tea ceremony practiced, you always have a cutout in the floor called the do, the sunken hearth. During summer, that place is sealed off because it's not in use, but in winter, that is used. And right around when the seasons change and where in tea ceremony the sunken hearth is closed off, also the new tea becomes available. So what happens is that in that jar where people put the fresh tea leaf in, that jar would be put into the sunken hearth, sealed off, left there during summer to stay cool and mature.
Mm-hmm.
And when the sunken hearth is taken in use, the tea is ready to use.
Good timing.
Good timing. Perfect cultural, what would you call it? Scheduling.
Scheduling.
Cultural scheduling.
So did they also have like a Shincha, a loose leaf, a whole leaf tea Shincha back then as well, or is Shincha itself kind of a new thing?
Sencha itself is a new thing.
Really?
They didn't start producing sencha in Japan until the 1740s, 1745.
Right, that's considered recent, isn't it?
That's very recent. If you look at tea culture and tea ceremony culture, especially being, having evolved in Japan since the 1200s, really
true.
taken shape in Japan during the late 1500s, 1600s, then 1740 is recent.
So
in tea history, yes.
Until then, did they just drank matcha?
Most of it was matcha, yes. Matcha, or I would actually advocate for saying that in Kyushu they had leaf forms. There were other places where they had leaf form tea, but it was not as codified as sencha, and it was probably more with a big frying pan, like a pan fire tea, as they do in China.
Chinese style tea.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And it was more for household drinking.
Right.
So probably you'd have a bush in your garden. You'd pick some tea when there's nice fresh pods, and you make some for the household for the rest of the year.
That sounds
could be considered more like bancha, actually.
I guess true. It sounds like it would be a fun experience, though, if we could try it. Grow your own tea plants, make your own tea.
Yeah, just have a little patch of land and get some tea bushes
That's
going.
The problem here in Japan, have a little patch of land.
I know. I have a little garden at my home, and I'm planting some seedlings, growing them from seed. But of course, it's only the second year, and they're like this big now.
Right.
So
it's going to take a couple of
but
years.
they're showing some sprouts, and so
that's exciting.
they're showing signs of life, which is a relief.
That's always exciting when you plants start showing signs of life.
Yeah. No, during winter the garden's always really dead, and I think, oh, did I do something wrong again? But then finally during spring, everything starts coming back to life, and
they were okay.
I forgot I had a plant there. So yeah, they go down, they come back. Nice.
All right, so that kind of leads in, and as briefly as possible, what kind of goes on during the rest of the year for the organic farms? So after the first harvest, that's it for the season, right?
Mostly, yes. So, summer is mostly
in terms of harvest, at least.
Weeding.
Out there in the sun, huh?
Out there, midsummer.
Eek.
Out there in the sun, soaking, drenched in sweat, hard laboring.
Eek.
Yep. Some might do another small harvest, but it's mostly taking care of the tea trees.
It's more maintenance, or
it's maintenance,
cultivating.
Really. Yeah. Gathering some leaves and branches from the neighboring forest, so that before winter you can add some natural matter to the soil, so that during autumn, winter, that can decompose and
build up,
become part of the soil, and you get a rich soil environment. So that's what most of them do. Yeah.
And some of them continue harvesting throughout
Some
the
of them
summer.
have a second harvest, or they just have different patches of land that they choose to harvest at a
Cycle
different
through.
time.
Right.
Yeah.
And let's see. And then after, so there is still work all through the year on tea farms, isn't there? Even though it's
There's
just
enough work, yeah.
the weeding and watering and planting.
The the real stressy period is spring,
Yeah.
because that's what matters most
For the completed product.
Yeah. For the product, the income, because of course you have to look at it as a business as well. You have to make sure that you can maintain your facilities and everything. So as a business, spring harvest is most important. The rest of the year is just making sure that your tea trees survive, that they are ready for the next year. Some farmers plant new tea trees, tea bushes on new patches of land. Some might be busy with cutting back overgrown tea gardens and again recultivating that land and putting new tea seedlings on it so that that can start growing as a tea garden again as well. There's always different things going on at the tea farm. Some are working to make their own compost. What else can I think of? What is going on? Oh, and you have time to experiment. That's actually when a lot of experimentation happens with, especially making some black teas, making some oxidized teas like oolong, doing some hand picking and experimenting with some hand rolling techniques, etc. So if you have a little bit of time, you can actually do more interesting things. That doesn't happen during the spring harvest because a farmer would actually almost not be able to sleep for several weeks.
Yep.
Because during the day you have to harvest.
And then you have to.
And your factory runs 24 hours.
Yes, it does.
And so, yeah, if you don't have a lot of staff, you maybe sleep 2-3 hours a night and then wake up again and go check your tea and check your machines and like, yeah, you're just busy all the time. And that is really why, it's actually one of the reasons why at the tea crane, I don't carry Shincha until June. I start offering Shincha in June. Reason being, two reasons really. One, I respect that the tea farmers that I work with are so busy already.
They don't need to be dealing.
That I don't need to be ringing them up. It's like, do you have tea ready? Can you send it? They'll kill me. That's one thing. But on the other end, I respect that they're so busy that I'd rather wait for a few weeks until they're calmed down a little, and that I can actually also go there, taste some of the different teas, discuss what has happened in that year, how the harvest was, what is different, from their experience also, what they experienced differently. Did they do something differently? Also, because sometimes they learned something the year before and say, if I change the settings on this machine a little bit, that alters the tea in that way. That's again interesting information that I always like to get. So if I can have that conversation, taste the tea there, then select it, that's always nicer than just being able to get the tea as quickly as possible for the sake of having it.
This is Shincha. Buy my Shincha, please.
Yeah, no, there's really more to it. And so I think that is important to have that information. The second reason is because most of the farmers that I work with actually only start harvesting later. They start mid-May, end of May, around June. Actually, they're still busy, really. And that's because they're higher up in the mountains, higher altitudes, and it's colder there.
So the
Yeah.
plants, well, the whole season is a bit later.
So while they're not able to bring out their very first pick until the end of May, you can actually already start buying Shincha by the end of April
And
from
that's
Kagoshima,
right.
from
Okay.
southern Japan.
Mhm.
And that's one issue that they are struggling with, because for them it's also Shincha. But people have already gone through a month of Shincha that this can't be Shincha anymore. So they're a little bit left behind by the tea industry, just wanting the quickest, to be the first. And for them, of course, they can bring that to their customers, but not to a general store anymore, because Shincha is already, well,
It's already done. The
yeah,
season's already over.
it's already over.
I
You're
guess
late. You're too late.
The mountainous regions around here would be almost the last.
They are the last.
They are the last.
Yeah.
Even up in Shizuoka. It's I guess the
It's quicker even. Yeah.
Really?
Around here is the last. The latest season really in Japan that brings its Shincha out is in Nara, Tsukigase.
Oh, up in the. Are they in the mountains?
Yeah. So they're can't do. Sorry. So they're up in the mountains, and the temperatures there are just higher. Yeah.
Lower.
Lower. Yeah.
And the season is later.
Mm-hmm. Ah, right.
Did we get a question?
No, we didn't get a question, but we will have to start wrapping up.
Ah, right. Oh, okay.
So I think we've covered a lot of info on Shincha.
Right.
And pretty soon, I think I'll be able to share more information as well. So
right.
It's been a great chat. Yeah. Ah, hi. Can you go and open the door?
Yes.
Hi. Please.
Hi, すみません、どうぞ。大丈夫です。ちょっと遅くなってすみません。どうぞどうぞ。あ、いえいえ。